You're listening to episode 196, Hannah's Story, a son with Vactrel Association. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Child Life on Call. This podcast is a safe place for parents to share their stories about what it's like to have a child that has a medical experience, diagnosis, disease, and or everything in between. We know there's power in sharing stories and that power multiplies when you can listen to other parents who have walked a similar path to yours. Giving and getting advice is great, but hearing how another parent navigates the complexities and nuances of healthcare is even better. As a child life specialist, my role is to support, validate, and provide emotionally safe spaces for kids and their families, and I am so honored to be on this journey with you. In addition to parent stories, we sprinkle in some expert episodes every now and again that have content for both parents and professionals in the field of healthcare, all with the mission to empower parents to be confident advocates and partners with the care team during healthcare experiences. We're so glad you're here. Hi, friends. It's so great to be with you today. I'm going to keep this intro nice and short so we can get right to Hannah's episode. But today we are talking about Hannah and her experience with giving birth to her son who ended up having Vactrel Association. And we have had one other mom share on this podcast, Ashlyn, and her son also had Vactrel Association. So in my conversation today with Hannah, she has been on other podcasts before where she's talked a lot about the pregnancy and the birth of her son. And today we really dive into like those first 2 years of motherhood and navigating a new experience and transition into motherhood as well as medical motherhood. So I'm going to stop talking now so we can just jump right into Hannah's episode. I'm so glad that you're here.
I'm Hannah Parsons, and I live in Los Angeles with my husband and my 2-year-old son, Obie. And yeah, we've been through a lot in the last 2 years. I spent the first half of my life being an actor and then kind of transitioned into more comedy stuff. And I lived in Chicago for a while, and then I got into editing and more stagecraft type stuff, doing lights and sound. And then I ended up here in LA with my husband, and with the pandemic and everything, pretty much fully transitioned into editing from home.
Yeah, and the transition into motherhood, all the timing at all the same time,
Yes.
at the same time. Oh my
Yes.
goodness. Oh,
Yep.
that's so cool. We have to talk more. I want to hear more about your past life as an actor and comedian. It's so exciting. When I was little, my dream was to either be on the news, so like every home video from 1986, I'm like signing off,
Oh my gosh.
or to be a comedian standing in front of the brick wall. Like that was in
Mhm.
my mind, it's like what I wanted to be.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I feel like those are actually not that far apart,
They're
but I
not.
never.
And now I'm a child life specialist, so who knows? And so your
Uh,
son, Obie, I know I've met you through other podcasters that I love, Kara Riska with the Special Needs Mom podcast, Jessica Pate with We Are Brave Together. And you've gotten to talk a lot about kind of your pregnancy and finding out what was happening with Obie. And I would love to hear what, the birth and after was like in navigating these past 2 years for you as his mom.
Sure. Yeah. So it was my first pregnancy, and we didn't have insurance, and so we took like maybe longer than usual to get our first ultrasound. I think we were like 16 weeks or something. And they came back with that he was missing a bone in an arm, in his right arm. And that sort of set us on a trajectory of a totally abnormal pregnancy. We were seeing specialists constantly. We were going to all these follow-ups, and it didn't really seem like there was a clear reason. All the people that we were encountering were like, "We've never seen this before. This is really weird." And I felt like I didn't really want to pursue more testing because I really felt like I was going to keep him, and I didn't see the usefulness for me in
Mm.
knowing the exact thing that was going on with him. I understand more clearly now that that would have been more for the hospital staff to, like, be
Oh, okay.
prepared for what was coming, you know?
Right.
Um, but I sort of got into this headspace of us versus them with the hospital because I felt like they just kept filling my head with, "He could have this, he could have this, he could have this," and
Mm.
I just wanted to be like, "No, he's gonna be fine, like, guys,
Yeah.
I can't grow this baby with that mentality. Like, that's not how this works. Like, it's really stressful to be pregnant and especially in a pandemic.
Mm.
And so I really like had to fight to keep like a space around myself where me and my husband were holding like he's going to be fine. That's just how it has to be that way. We'll deal with whatever happens when he's born then. But now it needs to
Mm.
be about like obviously keeping him safe, keeping me safe. So that was my pregnancy. And then he was born. They had to induce me because he was desatting. They were monitoring his heart and they just were like, "I'm so sorry. We have to." So it was kind of a surprise, like, "Oh, okay, at 37 weeks, let's just get him out."
Okay.
So they got him out, and thankfully, there was a good NICU at the hospital we were at, and they were able to diagnose, they were able to notice that he was kind of foaming at the mouth and that they, put a line down his esophagus and it just curled up in a thing instead of going straight down to his stomach. So they're
Okay.
like, "Oh, okay, so this esophagus is not attached to his stomach." And so they took him away, they figured that out, then they brought me to him. This was all pandemic, so it was like me and then my husband got to go and be informed of the same thing. So
Mm.
I went in and they were like, "So here's what happened." And
Yeah. Are you functioning at this point? Like, are you able to understand what they're telling you?
sort of, I've just been through a natural birth with no epidural and
Okay.
an induced birth. So it was very
Okay.
intense, and then I was sewed
Y-
up. So I'm kind of like,
uh,
anything's better than what I just went through, so, okay, like,
yeah.
great. I
Yeah.
hope he's gonna be fine. But I was
Yeah.
kind of like and I
Well.
think the oxytocin, I was, like, kinda
Mm.
high is what
Yeah.
it felt like. Looking back, I'm like, I was like, I took some selfies in the hospital, all like, "Hey,"
Yeah.
and I look back at those and I'm like, "That does not really reflect what's happening."
Right. Right. How interesting.
Yeah. I think I was very relieved to
Mm.
not be pregnant anymore, you know?
Yeah. And
And
he was here. And yeah.
well, they whisked him away and then needed to take him to another hospital.
Oh,
So he
okay.
was sort of out of my hands completely in a way that was initially very freeing because I was
Mm.
like, I've been holding this thing that
Mm.
has all this chaos connected to it, all this like stress connected to it. And now it was outside of me. And not only that, but there were professionals dealing with it.
Right.
So I kind of felt this relief of like, not all eyes are on me. I'm not
Right.
being poked and prodded. And
Mm.
so that was, yeah, that was. But I also, there was a moment in the hospital because I had to stay there for 24 hours before I could go to the hospital that Obie was transferred to for surgery. And I like after they told me what was going on with Obie, like I had this moment where I sat down on the bed and I was by myself and it was while my husband was being told. And I like had, I had that moment where I kind of felt what it would feel like to lean into it's all about to go wrong and like I'm about to lose my baby. And then, that felt really intense. And then I sort of took a breath and leaned away from that. And then my husband came in and I saw the look on his face and I was like, "Ooh, nope, we cannot go there. We cannot go there." So I just rallied and was like, "Nope, we're gonna continue exactly what we've been doing the whole time and he's gonna be fine." And
Mm.
that's the way we have to we're his support
Yeah.
team. We believe in him.
Right.
We're not gonna lean into fear. And so I felt like together we sort of went through that shift together where we kind of processed. And then it was pretty much like we're on the same page. He's going to be fine
Yeah.
for the rest of the journey.
Mm. Yeah, because what is the alternative? Just like
There isn't really.
crumbling?
Yeah,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
right.
Which is allowed and makes
Yeah,
sense to crumble in that situation.
absolutely.
So, were y did your husband leave you to go see him in the NICU? Did you guys go together? How did that work?
Yes, he initially went that night and followed him to the hospital.
Okay.
And my brother came to stay with me because we were only allowed one person with us at a
Mhm.
time. And then my husband, got set up, met Obie's nurse for the night, kind of got the lay of the land, like, okay, this is where we go, this is where we park, all that
Mm.
stuff. And then said goodbye to Obie and came back to the hospital to spend the night with me. And then the next morning, we as soon as we could checked out and went to the hospital. And he walked me up to where his room was, and that was my first like entry into that world of, I mean, and it is a world, as you know.
I
It's a different planet.
I've had a nurse navigator I worked with for a long time. She described it best to me, and she said, "When families walk in here, it feels like you're walking into a war zone." And at
Yes.
any minute, like, bombs can go off and you can be shattered, and it is just so true of that first, second, third walk of fear, and you don't know what's around
Yes.
you.
Yes. Yes. Oh, that is a really good way to describe it. Yeah. And that brings it all back, like, because each room, something different is happening.
Mhm,
You're feeling the emotions coming out of each room.
mhm.
And, every few seconds, a kid's being wheeled down the hall in an emergency fashion. And and then there's your connection to your own room. And, we lived really close to the hospital, so we would go home every night
Yeah,
and then come back early in the morning, as a lot of parents do. And so there would be this anxiety walking in because you didn't know if you were gonna
yeah,
walk in and it was gonna be bad news, you know?
yeah.
Eh, and then, the second somebody said, "Oh, he had a great night," you're like, "Okay, okay, 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 okay."
Right, or these moments too where you walk in and they're like and he's not there,
Oh my god, yep,
and
that happened to us a
they
couple
just move
times.
him across the hall, but you're like, "Oh," and it may have just happened, they may have not have even had a chance to tell you yet, but you're always on guard for worst case.
That truly I came up again, we were there for 2.5 months. So,
Mhm.
I got a really good I I mean, I experienced a lot of communication breakdown that caused unnecessary stress. Or,
Yeah,
man, just communication, I don't like, and it's something that it's
mm,
hard to in an organization because every hospital is different and it's just human beings. Like, we're all doing our best. We're all tired, we're all overworked. And but then, like, your kid comes back with the wrong kind of, like, he was supposed to at one point get an OG because
mhm.
he has very tiny nasal passageways. And they the doctor had written on the chart, like, he needs an OG.
Yeah.
And then he came back and he had an NG. And I walked in and they had bagged him and they were like trying to resuscitate him because he could not breathe. And he and then at the end of once they finally got him, they got it out of him. They had just had to yank it out because he was given
At
up.
that point, breathing was more important than yeah,
Feeding, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's the order
Mm,
of gotta
it's the
breathe.
word, yeah.
But, you know, I was in shock because I didn't know what the heck happened, and we had talked to the doctor, and and then she showed us what she'd written down, and she's like, "I'm so sorry, it was just I don't know what that person read. I don't know if they just made a judgment call that it would work better as a NG than an OG, or they thought I had miswritten it or something, but
Mhm.
somebody
Yeah, somewhere.
somewhere it got mixed up, and then that happened, and I walked in on that, and I experienced everyone, like, trying to save his life in a moment where that was not necessary, like, he had been fine, and
Mm,
it's stuff like that that, like, over time, you kind of lose your trust, and for me, what I started doing was really getting a lot more proactive and getting a lot more just militant about interviewing everybody who came in and worked with him and making sure they knew my name and knew my number and knew to talk to me before
mm.
they did anything and knew his history. And, I was just really, really on top of it. And I was taping notes to his bed
Yeah,
with necessary information. And
right.
uh that became and but then I had to at a certain point remember that that wasn't good for me either, that I needed to also
Mm.
trust people sometimes. And
Yeah. It's so Lindsay, who edits this podcast, she always reminds me, she's like, "Trust but verify." You know? And
ooh,
it's a good way to look at it. It's like, "I trust you, I'm gonna verify." And,
yes.
I love the way she puts that because it's true, like, you're gonna drive yourself mad just second guessing every little thing, but at the same
Yeah,
time, you walked into a situation and history tells you, "I have to make sure this is done correctly, otherwise it's done incorrectly."
yeah, yeah, and I saw it enough times. We this was weirdly, this was the real straw that broke the camel's back, was we had really developed a relationship with the team that was looking after Obie at this point. This was probably a month in or something,
Yeah.
and we had talked to everybody because he had had blood clots because of his PIC lines. He'd had multiple PIC lines in, like, the same vein and gotten blood clots, and, I mean, he's a 4.5-pound baby, so, like, they were doing their
Yeah.
best, but
Yeah.
he's a tough one to keep going.
Yeah.
A and then, he had an IV in his arm, and that I think, those go bad really fast, and so they'd talked about, because he was on antibiotics, he had gotten pneumonia from not being able to, he was aspirating his milk. I guess I should probably cover that, but yeah, he had his esophagus repaired through surgery, and then we were trying to feed him through a bottle. But because he didn't really get the practice swallowing, he was silently
Mm.
aspirating some of his milk into his lungs, and so he would get pneumonia, and then he would get antibiotics, and he would recover from the pneumonia, and then we would try again,
Mm.
and then he would get pneumonia again, and, so it was always this, like, "How do we keep this child fed?" Because we were really trying to get him to grow so we could take him home.
Yeah.
Um, but at this point, he still needed his antibiotics. He needed to finish his antibiotics, and he had, like, maybe 4 more days of antibiotics, and they were worried about the IV going bad, and so I think a PIC line had been ordered, and the last place that was available was his head,
Yeah.
and we really were like, "We don't want that. We really, really don't want a PIC line in his head. Please, please, please." The IV's still good, like, we talked to everybody, like, the nurse knew, like, that was gonna be last resort, but I
Mhm.
think somebody had ordered it, and because it's a team, like, a very special team that has to do that, and
Right.
they're only available certain times,
Right.
but we had talked, it was, like, before the weekend, so it was, like, a Friday, and we had talked to our day nurse. We
Yeah.
talked to the doctors, everything. Everyone, someone had even called us and been like, "I just want to tell you that I've talked to everyone. We're not going to do the pick line until Monday, if unless there's an emergency, whatever."
Right.
So we were like, ah, everyone's
Yeah.
communicating, everyone's listening to us.
Yeah.
And then we walk
No.
in the morning, and it's a new nurse who hadn't been there for the days before, but she's like, "Opie got his pick line," and we both were like, they'd shaved his head, they'd put in the pick line. He had a lot of hair too, so it was just half his head shaved with the pick line in, and we were so angry.
Yeah.
And, like, I can still feel it, like, my
Yeah.
whole body, I wanted to rip everything off the walls. I wanted and then, I just had to sit there, and rounds came, and I had to be with all these people who had promised me we weren't gonna do this, and
Yeah.
his freaking IV was still working, like, there was no reason.
Oh my gosh.
And then they had to go around in rounds and be like, "Yeah, we're really not sure what happened, like, we're not sure why he has the PICC line." And just the fact that they wouldn't know why
Right.
made me so that was like
Hey, how did you do you remember that rounds? Like, I don't even know how I would respond. Like,
w
somebody wanna explain this or what?
yeah,
And
I mean,
rounds is intimidating too, right? You've got
at that
your
point, not to
doctor
me.
not to you, okay. Yeah.
No, because everyone had been making mistakes, so I was like, "Y'all are just me, but you went to a different school." Like,
Mm,
I really didn't feel intimidated by
good.
anybody at that point, especially because I was keeping such meticulous track of everything that was happening and was seeing
Right.
how, like, y'all aren't focused. So
Mhm.
that was more my attitude. It's like,
Yeah.
y'all need to
Yeah.
focus. I know y'all are good
Mhm.
at your job when you're focused, but
Right.
this
This
isn't
is
this isn't okay.
communication. Yeah. You didn't go to school to communicate, it's
Yeah.
so oh my goodness.
So yeah, so I mean, immediately when the nurse came up and was all, la, la, he got his pick line. I was like, we did not want a pick line. Like, that was not the plan. And then she
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, uh-oh, I'm so sorry." And she apologized to us for
Yeah.
kind of not being on the same page. And then we ended up talking to the nurse, the night nurse who had let it happen because we hadn't talked to her. And that was the last time we didn't touch base with the night nurse before. Because I guess I was under the impression that the night nurses, there wasn't a lot that usually happened at night. Usually
Mm.
daytime is when most of the
Mhm.
big stuff happens. And
Right.
night nurse is usually just kind of maintaining, making sure
Mhm.
nothing goes wrong.
Right.
So we talked to her and she eventually, connected with us and was like, "I'm so, so sorry. I didn't know they came in and there was an order for it. And I just,
Right.
so it was a learning opportunity. But we, in rounds, were like, this is not okay. We talked to this person. We talked to this person. We talked to you.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
all told us we weren't gonna do this.
Yeah.
What the heck? Like, who's in
Yeah.
charge? None of you,
Right.
clearly.
Yeah.
And
You don't
we
feel safe.
No! I was like, I can't trust anybody. Now I'm gonna have to take him home." I truly was like, "I can't go home." That's what I felt like, and I think I
Mm.
expressed that in that round. So I was like, "I don't feel like I can leave because 'cause I'm gonna walk in tomorrow and he's gonna have, like, a new arm, and we'll be like, 'Why did
Mhm.
this happen?' You're gonna be like, 'I don't know.'"
Yeah.
Um, but they had, like, the head of the department, the NICU or whatever, come talk to us. I
Mhm.
think they were like, "Is this lady gonna sue us? Like, what's happening? Like, what's going
Mm,
on?"
yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like, "If I knew how to do that, I would."
I would if I weren't so tired,
I wasn't so
I could figure out how to do this. Ugh. So in some of these really painful, scary moments that were obviously it just takes such a toll on your emotional and mental health and your physical health, right? It all suffers. What were some of the moments where you did feel cared for? or you did feel like the team showed up in a way that made you feel safe or supported for you and your child?
So much of the time. I mean, these were big dramatic moments that I was just talking about, but by and large, everyone was so wonderful. And I mean, I remember being blown away just initially by all of the helpers. I had that, that Fred Rogers line in
Hmm.
my head of like, look for the helpers. And I was like, there's another person coming to check on him from another department. Like, how
Yeah.
many different areas of wellness are we checking on here? This is incredible.
Yeah.
And just, people bringing in toys for him. We would come in and there would be new books. Somebody put up, what are these called?
Like the mobile things?
Yes, a
Yeah.
mobile. He had a sound machine. We had a music person come in.
Hmm.
We had an energy worker come in towards the end, which I liked.
Yeah.
I talked to a therapist while I was in there. I talked to a chaplain. I
Wow.
talked I was just like, yes, and, please. Who else
Yes.
can come in, please? Yes.
Yes.
More
Yeah,
social workers, bring them in.
yeah, I love telling parents, like, you don't need to know the names of the people, just ask the question, "Who are the support people here?" And I want them to come in.
Yes. 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 And they're there. That
Yeah.
was incredible, or at least at the hospital we were at, there was a lot of helpers, and that was on top of how incredible our NICU nurses were. Like, I mean, those are the people that you really connect with when you're there, because they're
Mm.
day in, day out, really getting to know your child. And I mean, there were some instances where, you get the right NICU nurse too, and they can truly change the quality of life for your child.
Mm.
Like, if they just know a little trick to make sure
Yeah.
that he doesn't hurt when they're doing a certain thing. He had a bandage, from the drainage port after his surgery that kept having to be changed, and he would just wail because they had to change it constantly because it was just leaking and leaking and leaking.
Yeah.
And, it was like a bandage, and then it had bandages all around it to keep it sealed, and so it was just so much bandage removal constantly. And then this nurse that we had, I think we only had her a couple times, but she made such an impact because she looked at the situation and was like, "Nope, we're gonna change this." And then she put a
Mm.
permanent bandage thing on. Like, she figured out a way so that we didn't have to constantly remove it.
Wow.
And it changed that week for us because he
Right.
wasn't constantly in pain. And
Right. Right.
oh my gosh, what an
You know,
angel.
hearing you talk about NICU nurses, I've been privileged to work in a lot of different areas of the hospital. Most recently, before I left the hospital setting, I was in a NICU. And before coming into the NICU, I'm real aware of boundaries and that, like, in pediatrics, like, the nurses love on these kiddos and they take such great care of their patients, but the mom and the dad are the parents, right? And they have all this love. And when you go to the NICU, sometimes the lines feel so blurred of love. Like, the NICU nurses would be like, "This is my baby, and I will fight to the death." And, at first it was kind of off-putting because I'm like, "That baby doesn't belong to you." But then you realize, no, they do actually, like, they care and love for these babies like they are their own. And
Yeah.
it is amazing to see. And it has to be that way. It has to be that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're these fresh little beings, and I mean, we were I saw that we were pretty rare in terms of being able to be there as much as we were. Like, most people
Mm,
have to go back to work,
right. Other
depending on how old
kids.
their kids are.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have other kids. Yes. We
Yeah.
had plenty of roommates who were like, "I have other kids, like, I can't be here all day every day with my
Mm.
sweet." And I felt like, I mean, there's there's all that, like, HIPAA stuff about, I think it's HIPAA, about, like,
Mhm.
as their roommate, I'm not allowed to know the name of the baby and stuff like that, which, like, eventually you know the name of the baby.
Right.
But I was there so much that I was like,
Yeah.
I'll hold your baby, like, I'll help, like,
Yes.
I'm happy to
Yes.
like, when Obie's sleeping, I can hold your child,
Yeah, I
and,
know.
that doesn't usually go over that well, but,
I know. I know. Oh gosh, it's so true. Like, the parents who can be there often are like, "I noticed something was happening. You may wanna go check over there." It's true. It's like mama bear instinct for every baby around you.
yeah, and you end up learning, like, because you talk to them when they're there, you end up
Mhm.
learning about their kids, and
Mm.
you become the extra support for them, or you can be.
Mm.
So it is, that village starts to kind of populate as people
Yeah,
are more, are there for longer. After the month 2, we were like, "Okay, I guess we just live here now." We're just
right. This is
I was
it,
like,
second home.
yeah, ordering
What do you
food to the room,
Yes,
like,
yes,
very
yes,
comfortable.
yes. Talk to us a little bit about what you've learned about yourself since becoming Obie's mom and, taking into consideration, like, who you were before you became a parent and what it's like being Obie's mom. What have you learned about yourself?
Hmm. Well, I feel like I I've always I've been on my way to being Obie's mom forever, and, like, this is when I'm finally, like, getting to do the thing I was supposed to do. Like, I the person I was before Obie hadn't experienced much hardship, and that I obviously had the privilege of that, of having a life where I didn't experience a lot of hardship. For me, that made me feel really sad
Yeah,
and really, like, disconnected and scared to take chances because I felt like I'd never experienced anything hard. Well,
yeah,
I'd experienced something, but, in comparison with
yeah,
the state of the world and everything, I always felt like I didn't really understand where I fit into things or how I could help people or relate to people who were having
yeah,
problems. And I it's such a big gift to go through something that is just clearly hard. And you get to learn that you're strong. And I feel like everybody is strong, but you don't always get a chance to find out. And so that I mean, it changed my life for the better. It truly answered all my prayers to have a child with special needs because he taught me that I'm a worthwhile human being,
mm,
in this way that, like, I didn't even know I could
yeah,
know.
yeah. What you were
Um,
capable of.
I didn't know before. And man, having kids is so hard and so wonderful. And I know that's such a cliche, and it's so true. It's
Yeah,
just daily. You just have to be on your toes in a way that when you don't have a kid, you don't
right.
have to be.
Especially, with complex parenting and
Yeah,
it's another level.
it's another level. It's another level. And he opened my heart to be able to see all these other moms, and families, and I mean, Obie has flourished. Like, he we ended up leaving the hospital with a G tube. He's now off the G tube.
Wow.
He had chronic lungs disease. His lungs have gotten better. He had a hole in his heart. His hole's closed for the most part. Like,
Okay, show off.
I know
I mean, come
this
on,
boy.
Obie.
I know exactly. So I also feel this in this privileged position of, like, I got through a really hard season. Like, it was very intense. There was surgery, there was uncertainty, like, was he gonna make it? Was he not? Was he gonna get a trach? Was he not? Like, it was
Right.
all over the map. We didn't know the pregnancy was a shit show. Like, it was not
Yeah.
fun. I did not enjoy it.
Mhm.
And but on the other side of that, we have this healthy, thriving child, and I do not take for granted that that is not always the case and that we could have left and it could have gotten worse, and there are so many families that, you know, this is a very different story.
Mhm.
And so I just feel so grateful, and also like I want to spend my energy outside of parenting and work and everything doing whatever I can to share my experience, to find more and more ways to be there for other parents and guide them to resources.
Yeah.
And because that was a big, it's such a big question mark when you enter the hospital and you haven't been in this world, so you don't even know what you need.
Yeah.
And that is, you know, the helpers do find you, thank goodness.
Mm.
But there's so much more that I feel like there needs to be an orientation or something
Yeah.
where, and I'm sure some hospitals have that, but just something where you're like, "This happens over and over again. You're not the first one here. So here's what we
Yeah.
know. Here's what you need.
Mm. Mhm.
Here's these are the numbers you call in these situations." You may get the one of the hardest things was getting out of the hospital, and then it's all on you. And
Yeah.
you've thankfully been trained. I was trained, you know, it was like boot camp for how to take care of my child. But then it's like, "Oh, I don't get a break. I have to be here
Right.
24/7,
Right. Yeah.
and I don't have anyone to come give me a hand," you
Yeah.
know?
Mm.
So that I feel like that second chapter after you leave the hospital and you're navigating insurance and making sure you're getting your supplies and you're making it to your appointments, and dealing with the stress of like each provider holding you accountable, but not all of these providers realize what you're dealing with. Like
Yeah.
they don't realize that you're pumping every 3 hours
Yeah.
and taking care of this child full time and working
Mhm.
and managing his care.
Yeah.
And then they're talking about to you in a tone
Yeah.
when you're tired
Yeah.
and are, you know, like, "Well, have you been giving him this medication?" It's like, "I don't know, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know."
Yeah.
Like,
I
"Can you
know,
write
right?
this down?" Like, I had some providers who would just talk, 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 talk. Medicines, medicines, medicines. This time, giving him twice a day. I
Yeah.
would get nothing. I would get no piece of paper saying this. And I was
Yes.
like,
No.
"What?"
It doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work.
Brains don't retain information even on your best day in that way.
No.
And so, yeah. You mentioned resources. What were some of your or are some of your favorite resources right now that that have helped along the way?
Oh boy. Well, resources like We Are Brave Together, like
Mhm.
this podcast, Rare Life, Special Needs
Yeah.
podcast. Finding these podcasts was my doorway into at the very because for for a while there, that's how I found the Special Needs podcast was that I was just sitting on the couch after putting my son to bed, and I was like, "I feel so alone." Like, none of my friends are
Yeah.
dealing with this. My parents have, you know, they're so supportive, but they don't know what's going on, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
everyone's got their own lives. Like nobody's there like
Right.
24/7 for you. So I just needed to hear another parent who was having these issues
Yeah.
so that I could feel less alone.
Mm.
And that's how I sort of started finding stuff. I found Kara Riska's podcast, and then she has a support group for moms, which I joined immediately,
Good.
and then was in a support group for 6 months. And then she turned me on to Brave Together podcast, and then I got hired to work on that podcast. And that honestly has given me so much. I mean, we talked about earlier, maybe before we started recording,
Yeah.
about how editing. I'm the editor for Brave Together podcast, and we were talking about how your editor, you know, how it can be hard sometimes to hear these stories up from other
Mhm.
moms, because man, it's
It's a
this is
lot.
traumatic stuff.
Yeah, and you understand at a
Yeah,
different level.
yeah, you can be right back there and yep,
Mhm.
yeah, it
Yeah.
absolutely can be, but it's also very therapeutic just to hear that you weren't the only one who experienced that, and
Mhm.
then there are so many resources. I think one of the most impactful episodes of Brave Together podcast that I edited was about grief, and because I was feeling a lot of grief just popping up, a lot of, like it felt like jealousy, and it
Mm.
would be when other moms would talk about breastfeeding, and, I had the G tube feeds with my son, and I would feel so angry,
Yeah.
and I hated it, like, I just I'd be talking to other moms, which I was, like, so excited to be with another mom, and then
Yeah.
she'd be talking about, "Oh, like, he always wants to breastfeed," or whatever, and I was just like, "Ugh."
Ugh, I know. I
And
know.
there's so many things like that that I would, especially in the beginning, because I think I had a lot of expectations about what early motherhood was supposed to look like, and all the beauty and all the connection, and, you know, just holding your child naked against your chest, which was, like, really hard in the hospital, and,
Yeah. Yeah.
they say,
Everybody's
like,
watching.
everybody's watching, it's so weird, like, and you're in these really uncomfortable chairs. They're
I
so
know.
heavy and annoying. It just
Oh,
wasn't
yeah.
it took me, like, a long time to but just that it took me a
Yeah.
long time to understand what that was, and understand that that was natural, and that podcast
Mm.
about grief really illustrated to me that it's something that is gonna pop up forever,
Yeah.
and it's not bad. It doesn't mean that I'm a mean person.
No.
It just means that
You're a person.
I'm a person, and I maybe wanted it to be a little bit different than it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I'm so grateful to you, Hannah, for being here. And, I don't think we even mentioned Obie's official diagnosis. If you
Oh,
want to, you know, point some directions. I know I had sent you the podcast of Ashlyn who had shared their story.
yes.
So I love that. I think it's important so other parents going through it can, hear.
Yes. Yes, and I loved that episode. Thank you for sharing that with me. That was with these rare things, it's like it's hard to
Mm,
find another
it
parent
is.
that has gone through it.
Yeah.
And so it's a Vactrel Association is what he has, and, it's 7 symptoms that kids get in different, combinations, but he has 4 of the 7, and they don't know why they get
Yeah.
the Vactrel Association yet, but for him, it was his esophagus not being attached to his stomach was one of the symptoms, his esophagus, the bottom of it being attached to his trachea being part of it, and then a hole in his heart being part of it, and then he's missing a bone in his arm. So those were the 4 he had.
Okay.
And yeah, it's a real bummer in the pregnancy process when because I don't think because he had some genetic work done once he was born, and they didn't really come up with anything. I think he had
Yeah.
like a something that they're like, I mean, this is like a little weird, but like we don't, it doesn't point to anything.
Right.
So I don't, yeah, I think it's literally just for that diagnosis. It's just if they have 4 of the 7 symptoms, they're like, it's probably this thing.
Right. It's again like another thing that is just getting comfortable with not having answers. And most of the time when we grow up, we're like, things have answers. This is because of this, X is because of Y.
Right.
And that doesn't get to exist a lot in medicine, which is kind of surprising. You'd think that
Yeah.
it's gotta be in a book somewhere, right?
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You guys must have seen this. You must have come across this before.
Yeah. One thing that you said at the beginning where staff is like, "Oh, we've never seen this before." I'm like, "Oh, I wish that's just" okay, med school 101,
Don't
nursing
say
school
that.
101, child life school 101. Try to stay away from this phrasing because
Mhm.
it's just not helpful
Yeah.
and it's really scary.
Yeah. This I just remembered something that I did wanna
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
in terms of resources.
Mhm.
I did this weird thing of, like, I grew up kind of poor, and I have a lot of pride about, like, not taking money and stuff,
Mhm.
and even though I continue to be poor, I the social workers kept pointing me towards programs, and I took advantage of some of them, but not all of them, and I just
Mhm.
want to encourage anyone who qualifies to forget about your freaking pride and to take advantage of everything,
Yeah.
especially if you're in this situation where you have this added stress of a child who has needs. Take advantage of every single resource that is offered to you or that you qualify for. Even if you don't
Mm.
think you're gonna qualify, just fill out the dang form anyway,
Yeah.
because that you're gonna need all the support that you can get. And I just yeah.
That's such good advice, especially when you have a social worker, case manager who can help you navigate it because it's harder
Oh
to
my
do when
god.
you're home trying
Yes.
to do everything and then you still may qualify, but it's kind of like we were joking about you're not going to sue somebody because you're too exhausted to figure out the process. The same can happen with resources.
Mhm.
Yeah.
100%. It is a true miracle that I got IHSS because that
Yeah.
process takes a long time,
Hmm.
and that is a gorgeous program that exists in California that you gotta put your back into. Like, you gotta, like,
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
gotta fill out a lot of forms, and then they, like, lost all my paperwork, and I had to fill it all out again and bring it in person, and it was a nightmare, but thank goodness I got it
Yeah.
because that has been has allowed me to fully
Mm.
focus on taking care of my son in a way that I would not have been able to otherwise.
You deserve that. You do. Well, thank you for being here with us. Some of our guests like to share where people can follow them on social media. It's not a requirement, but if you want to share, that would be great.
Sure. I'm HK
Okay.
on Instagram, and it's a private account, but if you I think you can message private
Yeah,
people,
you
and
can
then
message in.
yeah, and if you're like, "Hey,
I'm a Vactrel mom.
I'm a
Yeah.
Vactrel mom, I wanna be your friend," I will
Yeah.
1000% add you, and we'll be friends. Because I would love to that's there's a special joy that comes in talking to somebody else who's
Mm,
in this situation, and I
community.
community, yeah, and G-tubes, when we were doing the G-tube thing, I was like, I I wanna be a support G-tube person because there's so much stuff that happens with G-tubes at home that you're like, "Who do I call?" And
Ooh, okay, new career idea. G-tube doulas.
ooh,
Right?
oh my gosh.
Let's make it happen.
Yes. That is a brilliant idea.
If anybody's listening, wants to be a G-tube doula, we will
Yes.
support you.
I'm gonna start my own hotline. I'm gonna be a G-tube doula.
Love it. Well, Hannah, I've loved talking with you, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you all so much for listening to Child Life on Call. If you head to our website, childlifeoncall.com, you're going to find all sorts of stuff there for parents, professionals, healthcare providers, child life specialists, no matter who you are. Actually, when you just go to our homepage, it'll help you direct to exactly where you need to go. On that, you'll find opportunities and PDUs for child life specialists. Parents, we've got a starter kit for you. And clinicians, we even have a clinician course, which teaches you how to be a confident and capable caregiver in pediatrics. We're so grateful that you're here. Please DM us on Instagram. And like I mentioned, when you rate and review this podcast, it helps other families be able to find us. So let's keep doing that. And I will see you again here next week.